if I can keep him here.
Da-da-da.
Hello! This is my emotional support cat, not a goat. Okay, I'll let you go. Welcome to a very special bonus episode of Nerdist Book Club. Joining me as always are my favorite people, Maude, Garrett, and Hector Navarro. Hey y'all, it's a Friday and we're doing a stream.
Oh, hey, we're talking about some amazing stuff today, which I'm super excited about. I don't know about you, but I binged the show in like maybe 2 nights. Maybe 2 nights.
I took about a week. I took some time, but I'm also incredibly excited to be here. It is a Friday, and I got my LaCroix. I'm ready to party.
Ready to do it. I honestly contemplated like making myself a little mimosa, but I have work to do after this, so I didn't. But if you are new, welcome to everyone at home. Thank you for joining us. If you're joining us live, if you're watching this later, we definitely want to hear from you still too, because we really want to watch or talk about the show and the book. Introduce yourself if you're new in the chat. Let us know some of your favorite books. And today, as we mentioned, we have our first ever bonus episode of Nerdist Book Club to talk about Netflix's Shadow and Bone. What's happening? Do you hear that?
Yeah, there's an outdoor activity somewhere. Yes.
I'm sorry. I just got distracted for a second. But we are talking about the Shadow and Bone Netflix series. We just finished reading the entire trilogy of Shadow and Bone on Nerdist Book Club. So if you've only watched the show and you haven't read the books, you can go back and watch those past episodes too. So let's get into it. Either one of you in the chat, did you like it? Favorite parts? Anything you want to talk about? This is our time to kind of fan person out about this adaptation.
For me, I liked some of the changes that they made, just to kind of keep it more concise with the storytelling, whilst introducing new characters like the Six of Crows, or mainly focusing on the trio's story, and then like introducing the other origin story of another sort of like duo that we have happening. So there's a lot going on. So I understand the need to simplify it, because we are talking about sort of very fictional regions, and world building is very essential to the storytelling here. I have a few gripes as well, though. There are some changes that I think are brilliant, but there are some of the changes, having read the books first, I was watching it being like, why was that necessary? That didn't necessarily feel like a necessary change for me. But I like and enjoyed what they did. I thought it was visually spectacular. I love that it's like a very diverse cast. I also noticed, though, that you can tell who the experienced and inexperienced actors were, because when you put them in scenes together, someone will act the pants around the other person. And I will go into detail with that, but I don't want to focus too much on the gripes. I had a real good time. This series is the GOAT.
What was the Maude, what was can you give us one example of a change from the book that you were like a little taken aback by?
I can give a few. They made sort of like subtle changes to the law. Alina, they made her half Shu to kind of get the political side of that. That's a change that I really liked. They changed the Darkling's name to General Kerrigan, which I didn't think was necessary. I don't have any issue with the Darkling being the Darkling, because she's the Sun Summoner, and that's your yin yang sort of like mixed. Yeah, the fact that we got Alexander, the name, I completely agree with that. I was like, why? The whole like him being an anomaly, him being, you know, sort of like literally in the shadows and not having sort of tangible understanding of who he is. That's what was great about the series. He was becoming a little bit more humanized throughout it. And in this particular one, yeah, it was just like, that didn't feel necessary. I wish I'd read Six of Crows before watching the series. I think understanding half of the show and learning about the other half and the characters in one go was a little bit too much for me. I've heard some people say that they prefer the Six of Crows sort of subplot. For me, I didn't understand it as much, so I really had to kind of focus on that and couldn't enjoy it as much as I did the Shadow and Bone themes in it. But I also read on Nerdist's site, there's an amazing article talking about what did and didn't work when it came to the changes between the book and the show. And it said that the Crows subplot made it a very beeline story when the Six of Crows are anything but a side character or like a subplot. And that should have been sort of like its own series or done better. Anyway, that's me done.
That's really interesting. I can kind of get that. I felt for me like first of all, I really enjoyed the show, and I was really impressed with most aspects of the show across the board. In terms of like acting, I was mostly impressed with the acting. In terms of the directing, mostly impressed with the directing. The costumes, mostly impressed. Like just pretty much every facet of production of the show, I was impressed with. And I was also impressed with the translation from the 3 books that we read to the show. And I remember thinking that it was an interesting choice, and I was almost trying to be like, well, I kind of maybe I don't like the choice, the fact that the Darkling's name Alexander was revealed as early as it was. But then I was thinking about it, and I want to talk about that for a second, because I was thinking about it while watching the show, and then I remembered when we were discussing the 3rd book, we were saying there's a lot of great character development and writing happening in this book. Would have been nice to kind of have that maybe a little peppered throughout the first 2, maybe a bit more. So I felt like that change was a specific choice to try and get more character motivation and sympathy towards the Darkling character, which is kind of present in the 3rd book out of all 3 of them, I would say. Correct me if I'm wrong. And was present in the show when we got a whole half of an episode or intro or like that flashback where we actually see the fold created. And I appreciated that. And I thought that was very interesting. And it reminded me of the 3rd book where it's like, oh, we're getting more of the backstory of him and his mother and what they went through. And in the show, they're actually showing it to us and we're kind of getting it versus like characters telling us what happened. And when you read that it's fun when you read that in a story and there's 2 characters sitting in a room and one of the characters telling another character what happened, your brain can still, sorry, Rachel, visualize you tend to still go to that place anyway, even if the only thing happening in the scene is like when within the narrative, it's not a flashback, but it's just characters talking. You can still tend to go to those spaces. And it didn't mean the visualization joke. I mean, even I know. Even if you can't visualize it, you can still go with the characters and what they're saying and the words that they're saying to go back to that place. So it kind of works as a flashback within the narrative. But in a TV show or in a movie, it's different. So they literally had a flashback sequence, which I appreciated. So in terms of the character's name, and somebody in the chat said, it was helpful. I think it was Ian. It was helpful that like the Darkling wasn't called the Darkling.
Yes.
But then Maude, you said you didn't have a problem with that in the book. And so I think both takes are valid, but I do feel like I'm sure that came up at some point when developing the series, and somebody went, well, does the Darkling have any other name? Because his name is the Darkling. And at least for this first part of the story, we're trying to build up this character as like a potential ally, a good character, a mysterious man, but like maybe a love interest for Alina, somebody like a mentor, something to where an audience doesn't immediately go, but wait, his name is the Darkling. That's like the evil little one. Like, how can we not see through that? So maybe they decided, well, should we give him an alias, a fake name that's more like a normal human name and not a title like that, like the Darkling? And then someone went, well, let's just make it Alex. Might as well just cut to the chase and make it Alexander. That's the thing where I'm like, I wonder if it would have been more impactful if in a future season, fingers crossed, that we get that moment where he only tells Alina his name is Alexander. Yeah. Right? That was a big part of the book, and it helped the reader through Alina have more sympathy for this character and be like, man, it's really kind of messed up. He did feel so lonely. And that was a huge part of his character. So I wonder if maybe they had gone with a fake name, and then Ben Barnes is playing Darkling / Peter or something, like for this first season and a half, and then at the end of season 3 he's like, my real name is Alexander, whatever. I don't know.
He's a shadow summoner. Like he provides the darkness. Like when you explore what his character can do, I actually don't think that the Darkling is the giveaway. It's the fact that he's a shadow summoner and needs a lot. Like so that, and it was a boop boop. It's really on the nose. So for me, I don't know. I kind of liked the juxtaposition, like that balance that they have, the dark and the light. Like that is what you particularly need in this moment. But I understand, the gripes for that one. I still think
I want to call out some of the great comments about what people liked. I think everyone, which is great, has different opinions on what worked and what didn't, but just calling out some of the great ones. There was, let me see. Oh, well, we already commented on calling yourself the Darkling would be really sus, which I love. Nick's Wings says, I love the way they did Mal and Alina's childhood flashbacks. Beautiful. A lot of people are saying they made Mal more enjoyable. I've been saying that on book club as a reformed Mal hater. I still don't love him in the first 2 books, but I love him in the show. And I think their relationship, as I imagine I was supposed to feel a little bit in the books, is much more clear to me. And I agree with you, Hector and Maude. I think giving away the Darkling's name was unnecessary, but I do think that it is helpful for the story and potentially in a season 2 to humanize the Darkling a little bit more. He's still obviously a villain, but the make me your villain, the flashback that we get kind of opens the door to more in hopefully season 2 to have Alina sort of start to doubt herself, because she did just leave and she didn't talk to him about it. And the Darkling can gaslight like nobody's business. He's been around a long time. So I think that would be super interesting too, because Maude, I know throughout reading the books, you were frustrated by a little bit Alina's pull to the Darkling after.
Happened again in this episode in the show.
What?
It happened again in the show.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but I think that was due to lack of chemistry.
Oh, wait, who are you talking? You're talking about the actress who played Alina and the Darkling. That's what you're talking about, Alina and the Darkling. The lack of chemistry. Ouch! Are you sure you weren't just just kind of how can I put this delicately? Really vibing on Darkling and kind of maybe wanting to see some more?
I would like to see a little bit more depth with this version of Alina. For me, like initially she's in the books, like the reason why her and Mal isn't the most likable character in the first book is because she's kind of kept on the outside. She's kept safe, treated more like a sister, but you have such an amount of comfort together. When she goes into this palace, like they don't really have much time together. There's no real sense of like adoration that she has for him. And then she makes the move on him. And for me, that didn't kind of like, it wasn't, I know TV chemistry. I get that whole sexual buildup and it didn't really happen. It kind of was like all of a sudden she was kissing him and his response was great, but it just didn't quite click for me that it made sense. There wasn't enough sort of leading up to that particular moment. And I'm also really bummed that Mal, wasn't able to sort of see those two together. The fact that Mal has a scar and she got rid of it. I don't know. There's like a bunch of things, but I locked onto one. I feel bad saying this because I'm not an actor and she's doing her best, but I noticed a crutch or something that Jessie May Lee falls into when it's a close up. And that is what I'm going to call like the stunned fish. She will go. And I saw that the whole series and it took me over.
I'm sorry that was part of your experience. I do want to also talk about the crows because you had both kind of mentioned, and Hector, I'd love to know your thoughts on them, but I was curious definitely if that would work. It sounds like in the chat it did work for some people who did read the books or who didn't. And yes, I think I love the piece on Nerdist that everyone should check out that I know we put in the chat. But one thing I do disagree with about the crows is I see this almost as like a soft prequel for the crows because the events of the book, the actual books, the Six of Crows duology, happen obviously after the events of the trilogy, but also we don't have them all together yet, which you mentioned, Hector, and we haven't even met, I don't think, one of them, but having them tie into the narrative, and I just think they're so fun and charming, and they take a little bit of they're a good balance, I think, of the drama, the high drama and high fantasy and tortured romance, and then just the best fun heist characters. And it opens the door for, hopefully, I think, a spin-off with more of their kind of missions and adventures and heists and including everyone. And also, best edition, I gotta say, Milo the Goat. Milo the Goat,
Clearly.
not in the books, heart of my life. Also, the casting, I think, and we've talked about this, especially folks who have read the Crows books, but those characters are so well defined and you get different perspectives in those books. And I think the casting for Kaz, Inej, and Jesper is so good, especially Jesper. He's just perfect and charming and lovely. So I love him. And I also, I think it's a little convoluted. There are moments where I was curious if you hadn't read the books, if you would be confused. I always think that about adaptations. So if anyone who's watching right now has only seen the show, I would love to know your thoughts on that. Go ahead, Hector.
I was a little bit confused. It's funny when we're discussing both aspects of the show, and it is a very much like an A plot and a B plot, or at least two separated things. Three, right? Because then we get that other flashback storyline. Somebody in the chat said earlier that they were glad
between Nina and Matthias.
Yeah, they were glad that Nina and Matthias' story was being told that way, because in the books later, that's only kind of gone over in a flashback a little bit. And I was like, oh, that's pretty interesting too. So it's these three separate storylines. It felt very Game of Thrones. It felt very, big ensemble cast and let's jump around and
moving pieces on the map to get to their crossover storyline.
Whatever it's going to be. And I felt like for the most part during the show, I was never bored, but I was more invested in the Mal and Alina storyline, truth be told. I was very invested in what Mal was doing and what Alina was doing for them to kind of link up and for everything to happen. When we would cut to the Six of Crows, man, it was fun. And those actors are incredibly charismatic and they're all super, super attractive. And it was really cool and interesting. And I also especially liked, because I knew a little bit going into it that the Six of Crows were like this group of sort of bandits or criminals or whatever it is that they do. But I knew it was Kaz, Inej, and Jesper. So then this character comes in as the conductor, Arkin, the conductor, and the actor Howard Charles, who played
didn't work for me.
I loved that character. I thought that character worked extremely well. I thought he was incredibly interesting as a sort of not cowardly, but he just had this whole side motivation. And at the end, when he goes to try to kill the woman who is disguised as Alina, unfortunately, because then we kind of learn in a flashback. And as that was happening, I was kind of caught up with that. And I was going, oh, you know what? Somebody must have gotten to him. And it was an assassination plot, because the whole time when he's working with the conductor, it's as though the Six of Crows characters roped him into this deal that he didn't want to be in, but he's like, okay, I have this train, we'll use it, we can do this thing. And that whole thing through the fold was kind of interesting and cool and scary. But the character, the conductor, was this where he's like, oh, just get me to the door, I know how to get into the door. He would know how to get through technical challenges or whatever. Anyway, I thought that he was very interesting, because he was not as typically cool as Kaz or Inej or Jesper. They're the coolest characters. And then you have the conductor, who is this bespectacled, is a little bit of a heavier guy, and he still had power, and he still had a lot of at a point where Inej ends up replacing the acrobat. We learned it's because the conductor was like, oh, because I cut her rope and killed this woman. Just going off of the fact that that Inej should be able to replace her. These kinds of moving things around as sort of a a puppet master and having these plans. And then at the very end, when he's confronted by the Darkling, I really like that scene, because he starts and he's lying and he's lying, and then the guy's like, he's lying through his teeth. But then eventually he's like, yes, this is what I am, this is what I'm doing. And if you give me that amount of money, I'll go get this person for you, Darkling. And the Darkling's like, no, I'll handle it myself. I like the way that his storyline also kind of wrapped up. He died. He was killed. Yes? He died at the end of season 1?
I thought that's how they were going to show that they make them into the Nichiboye or...
Oh, right.
Yeah.
So that could happen. So to sort of sum up, I was having fun with those characters, but it did feel at times especially convoluted, even more so than an Ocean's 11 movie with all the various, aspects of the plot and the characters that they're talking to. And then I'm like, okay, wait, so they're leaving the coastal city. And when they, everything that was just leading up to them interacting with, seeing Alina, trying to kidnap Alina, ending up kidnapping her accidentally, but then she escapes. And the other thing is the entire time I thought that this is what the Six of Crows books was that they were the same story from the first or second book or whatever, but just told from a different perspective. And then you told me in the last episode, actually, their storyline takes place completely after. So then I was thinking about it, and I was going, well, then it was very, at times it did feel a bit forced that these characters were even involved, but knowing that they're fan favorite characters and like they do cool shit after the main trilogy, I'm like, okay, so then that's actually, it could have been a lot clunkier the way that they were included into the narrative that I'm already familiar with, that they weren't a part of in the books that I read. So, you know, with those three different storylines, the Six of Crows, I liked it, but I really wasn't like super into it until kind of things started coming together at the end. Consistently intrigued with Mal and Alina, and then with Matthias and the other woman, Nina, still not all the way sold, but like they're good actors, and I was and I felt some of the betrayal and kind of the heartbreak at the end. But the whole time I kept thinking, I'm like, Nina, this dude is racist. You do not have to like forgive him, fall for him, think he's cute. I'm like, dude is flat out, like from the beginning, is a horribly prejudiced person. But then again, if the idea is that like he was wrong and he's going to learn about how he was wrong, and through that fall in love, you know, this kind of star-crossed lovers type of a thing, like Romeo and Juliet, I get it. And some of it was very well done and sad and or funny or whatever. But yeah.
I think we could have, obviously they intertwined the Six of Crows plotline within Alina and Mal's sort of like main storyline, and they made that sort of quite fluid. But then I feel like the Nina and Matthias scenes didn't connect. They were a little pointless. I felt like they were slower in pace. And I feel like, yes, it's great to have an origin story, but it didn't really, I think someone in the comments was saying, I didn't know if this was Alina's parents. Like I didn't really know who they were or why they were fitting into the story. And I think absolutely agree that could have, like, if you took every one of those scenes out, the entire story still made sense. So it didn't have much purpose or point yet. And I think I'm agreeing with a lot of people saying that the Six of Crows are based on sort of like a heist. But is this now, because we've only seen this version of like a fabricated, pun intended, version of events, are we not going to actually get the full scope of what their heist mission is going to be like? Because we kind of had like a little bit of a watered down version in this season. And I think for me, yeah, I don't know. I do have a question though for you, Hector, and that is, if you had read do you like Alina and Mal's storyline because you've read it and you understand it more, and you're only meeting the other characters for the first time and don't have that sort of rich history?
I mean, maybe that's kind of tough to say because I can't, you know, switch my brain to be like, okay, forget the three books. How can you now watch the show? Because they're in there no matter what I do. But I think it could be a combination of that. But I also really thought that the show did a good job of setting up that like Alina as this chosen one and her power and her whole storyline. And I was watching it with my girlfriend Abby, and she has not read any of the books yet. So the stuff she was responding to, I was really paying attention and being like, interesting. She was all in on Alina and she was all in on the power. And the first episode, I think, does a good job. Somebody earlier in the chat asked, you know, or just said, the Fold, what'd you think of the Fold? And I thought it looked super cool. And that opening episode where they actually go through it and you see the creatures, my girlfriend was like, what is happening? What is this show about? And I was like, well, you don't even know what's about to happen. And I know how the entire saga ends. So it was fun to see her respond to the visual effects and the powers on display, and for her to understand, and for me to see the show tell us like, hey, Alina is the main character of the story. Like she is the chosen one. She is the Harry Potter. She is the Frodo with the ring, whatever. Like this, her thing is going to change the world. Meanwhile, let's cut to these fun characters off on the side. And they were fun, but it almost felt like with a lot of the Six of Crows scenes and on their coastal city, I was like, this feels like the Pirates of the Caribbean movies, which is cool, but they all kind of do evoke some of that Jack Sparrow-y vibe. And it's like, Jack Sparrow is not the center figure of his universe. Jack Sparrow as a character is designed to be this fun diversion, this fun, like chaotic sort of, you know, but like the central conceit of the Pirates of the Caribbean world is like there's magic and there's curses and there's the pirates are sort of dying out, but it's their last gasp, and so they're doing these big moves and these big swings, and here's all the pirate kings and all of that stuff, or like a main curse or whatever. Alina for me was that, and then the Six of Crows was like, so Alina was like, yeah. Alina was the Orlando Bloom and Keira Knightley of the pirate movie, right? And then, but Jack Sparrow is more fun, obviously, and so to answer to go off of what you're saying, Maude, it's like I'm not familiar with the Six of Crows books. I don't know if Netflix is planning to do 3 seasons of Shadow and Bone with Six of Crows characters interspersed throughout. So like maybe the events of books 2 and 3 will be vastly different if you include those characters in it. Like, what is that going to be? How will they change it? And then after those 3 seasons, they want to do a Six of Crows spin-off show. No idea. That could be cool. And in which case, in that show, are they going to go back to the Six of Crows books and be like, okay, now we're doing it for real? Or will it be completely different and original because of the way that all of the story sort of maybe changed in the development? I don't know.
I have thoughts.
Yeah.
So a couple of things. I agree with everyone in the chat wanting more episodes. I think that would have helped if it had been 10 episodes at the very least. I will say that the Crows books, not just taking place, later, but the whole kind of deal is they do, with the reference to the painting at the beginning, and that man comes up to Kaz and is like, this painting got stolen. It's worth all of this stuff. And he's like, I don't know what you're talking about. And then it's in the back, like very subtly in the background of his room. And so they do those kinds of jobs. So I personally don't think that would take away from it. And I also, without spoiling any plots, there are maybe things or people that they need to find that with a tweak, I think could work. And for those of you who have read the books, let's chat about it on the Discord or something with spoilers. And I also think that I was a little on the fence about Nina and Matthias being included in this season, but it's also in the Crows books, that's sort of a flashback that you get. So it is, I agree with Lisa, who was saying they're kind of planting the seeds for those characters. I would love to see a spinoff and a season 2 and using those, using some of the intrigue of the Crows books, and then maybe at the end they cross back together.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, because
I was going to say, do you think that maybe like Jesper would be like a Toya, and like Inej would be more like a Tamar?
I think they're going to split up because they say goodbye to each other. They, they're aware of each other, but I do think that having, Shadow and Bone continue, and we're going to see more new characters, I hope, if they do the 2nd and 3rd books. I really was hoping for like a tiny little hint of a Nikolai in there somewhere at the end. Badly, but I do think that I hope they get more episodes, more seasons, more spinoffs. I want to
like Mortal Kombat teases Johnny Cage by being like, we're going to Hollywood, and then they pan and there's a poster that's like Johnny Cage in a movie. Is that kind of Nikolai tease? You wanted something like, we're dealing with some pirates.
Not even more so with the conductor, like with the conductor even.
Yeah.
Maybe there's some element there that they could bring in, but I imagine they haven't cast him yet because he is part of that next storyline. And Kat also loves the painting reference in the beginning. That is great.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
Sorry. When you're in a show like this, like you are introduced to the characters, and then you're learning their relationships with each other, and then you're seeing them learn things for the first time, and then I think that honestly, even especially because there was only 8 episodes, having a thorough understanding of not only Mal, Alina, the Darkling, Bagra, even like understanding who sub-characters like Ivan, etc. are, to kind of build that understanding and the tension. Your Jenya's, your David, who had one really kind of funny line with the, but like you're trying to jam in so much character understanding and development whilst building out this very, very difficult world building. And then you've got your three crows in their storyline, understanding their lore, which is kind of like not so much focusing on the Grishas as much, but the underground side of thing and their thoughts of business. And then you've got the Matthias and the Nina thing, which doesn't come into the storyline. Honestly, there was just too much. And I think we kind of were surfacing too many things in there. I just think that if you lost one of those side stories, you could go a little bit richer and more deep with it so that you care a little bit more. But there's like weird things like, we're going to make sure that Jasper gets laid. Like that is super important for us. We're going to make sure that even Ivan has his gay moment, and then Nina has her throwaway, lesbian comment. And it's like, it's really kind of fascinating to see what they're prioritizing with their storytelling and how they're kind of like giving purpose to all the characters. And it's kind of through like relationships and orientation. Yeah. But they were like the standouts for me anyway.
Yeah, there was it's interesting too, because as you were saying that, Maude, I was like, well, I'm glad that they did go to those other characters and storylines and didn't just focus on Alina and Mal, because I'm flashing back to when I read the first book, and there were times where a lot of the first book is like Alina at the palace and her going through that storyline and building that up. And when we were reading that, I was like, this is not as interesting to me. And maybe the show hopping to those other storylines made me almost a little impatient to get back to the Alina and Mal stuff, so that when we did, I was like really into like, okay, Alina's here in the palace, what's going on. And the other thing too is I had a difficult time connecting to some of the characters while reading the books, some of the side characters, even though they have very distinct personalities, and characters like David and those kinds of things. But really watching, having read all three books, and especially the third one, which I think did the best job of giving those characters kind of voices to me and fleshing them out, watching the show, I was really happy that I had some familiarity with the characters. But like, even when I saw one character show up, played by an actor like David, and he had just a moment, I was immediately like, oh, I really understand this character a lot better, just because it's like a flesh and blood actor who is like, who has a presence and a personality, and really, really great. And coming into the scene, and then
doesn't have a lot, but even when he's in the background and you see him, you're just like, oh, that's David.
Exactly. And the same for it was Zoya, who was she's the woman who's always like healing and fixing her hair and everything like that, right? I thought that actress did a great job as well. And that was a character who has a big presence in the books, but I never quite sort of connected or like in my brain solidified who Zoya was as a character. I watch an episode that she's in and I was automatically like, okay, I feel like I know what she's about, and the hints towards what she was going through when we get the big reveal in season 1 about her character, I thought was very well acted, and it was sad. And I went, okay, I know who Zoya is. And thinking about the books, I'm like, I know where she goes in these next sort of adventures. And it helped me just kind of visualize and solidify everything. So like, I liked that, even though, but I get, I don't know, maybe if I were writing the show or working on the show, whatever, maybe I would say, hey, let's make sure to focus more on Alina and more on Mal. But I think that for the most part, their storyline, and hate to break it to everybody, they're not the most complex of characters.
Yeah,
they're young, right? They're young people. I think that if there were more focus given on them, I think it would have been great and really appreciated. But I also am kind of like, I think that they did their homework, especially when it concerns Mal. I know we were contrasting and comparing the character of Mal between this show version and the book version. I think the show version is much better and much more understandable. And I felt like maybe because I had read the 3 books, I was like, yeah, I know Alina and Mal, like, because the books focused on them the most, and the Darkling, and then all the rest of the characters. That every time we saw them, I was sort of like, yeah, I know them. I know what's happening. I know what they're thinking. And so things weren't really frustrating me or throwing me in that regard. Do I have a favorite show character? Jesper's great and super fun. And I just want all those characters to get laid constantly.
Yeah, let everyone smooch. I would smooch every single one of them.
Yes,
every single one.
My favorite is honestly probably Mal.
I mean, he's very handsome, but in the book, Matthias,
yeah. No thanks, Matthias. No thanks. But I think my favorite might be Mal in the show, and I think that the actor who plays Mal, what's his name? I'm gonna pull it up right here. Is Archie Renault. Renaud
because I followed them all on Instagram.
Did a great job. I think he did a great job. I think he was I think he was a really good pairing with Jessie May Lee, who plays Alina. And anytime
a lot better.
I mean, listen, anytime they were in scenes together, I felt like you are on the same level. And if there were scenes between Alina and Darkling, yeah, it felt like it was a bit one-sided, not just in terms of performance, but just like I'm watching the show with my girlfriend, and my girlfriend, she kept saying, "How old is the Darkling?" And I was like, "Yeah, Ben Barnes is about 10 years older than the rest of this good-looking younger cast.
15.
He's in his late 30s. He's 15 years older. He's in his late 30s." But then I spoiled my girlfriend, and I was like, "But he's not that age that he looks." And she was like, "Oh, is he super old?" And I was like, "I'm not gonna say." And she's like, "Is he super young?" And I was like, "I'm not gonna say." But she figured it out. Like
Dorian Gray.
Yeah, it's a weird thing, but like there was a little bit of, it's just like how Vision and Wanda, Scarlet Witch, it's great that they're together.
Vampire story ever.
But it's still a little weird to see.
Talk about the Darkling and Alina too.
Yeah, we'll do that. But it's still sometimes weird to see Paul Bettany and Elizabeth Olsen because of their age difference, especially when Paul is human Paul. You're like, oh, he is older than her, and she's like,
years, right?
Yeah, she's like 29 or what. Like it's weird. So even though the Vision is only supposed to be like 2 or 3 years old, it's still physically there's a actor there, a male actor or a female actress. There is a dynamic that's happening there. There's visual, subconscious stuff that we're seeing. So like, I think that the cast was mostly really well cast. I think all the actors did a great job, but it was a bit jarring to be like, here's Ben Barnes. He's in his late 30s. He's playing this character who we learn later is thousands of years old, and he's going to have a romantic thing with Alina. And that's always, it's one thing when it's in the book, but it's another thing to actually see it in person, flesh and blood. And you go, oh, they didn't have to make the Darkling that hot. I mean, I think they did, and they pulled it off. That's the point.
And this has been a conversation definitely online about the Darkling, and we've talked about it as well. But I think part of what works is that you're like, God, this Darkling or General is just beautiful and all of that stuff. But also you feel a little weird when this is happening because you're like, what? Like, because he is manipulating her, but also at the same time, you're like, this is really hot. Like map room. All I have to say is map room scene.
Yeah, I like the fact that the Darkling's supposed to be this big bad, and yet he still understands consent.
I know.
So then you don't have any excuse.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. But I also think that's his way of getting her to trust him even more. Yes. And so I think it's kind of deliciously evil. And he's, yes, he's a much, much, much older and physically looks older than her. But like that happens in so many supernatural stories that, and it's fiction. So,
yeah,
it's not like, yes, I am Team Darkling. If the Darkling existed in real life, no, he's evil. But would I smooth him? Yes, 100%.
And I think even though and I think even though the show's only 8 episodes, I think that the show does even do a better job than even all of book 1 in like building up that like we should kind of be rooting for Alina to be with Mal and Mal to be with Alina, and we can have our fun with the Darkling in those scenes, and it's incredibly sexy. And honestly, the casting of Ben Barnes and the fact that he is a little bit older than the actress who plays Alina, it does tie into the fact that the Darkling has a much higher status than any character around him constantly. So that dynamic is in there. That dynamic is built in there. Just look at that picture. He has the highest status of anyone who exists in this universe. And Alina's like, I don't even know what I'm supposed to do here, which is great. So that all ties into it, and I think that the show does do a good job of getting us to kind of root for Mal as he's making his way back to her, and it was kind of sweet. And it was, anything that had to do with him tracking and going on that insane quest of trying to find the stag. I was into it. My girlfriend was into it. We were rooting for him, and my girlfriend hated when the stag died, though. I'm gonna be honest. That almost lost her in the whole show. She was very upset.
And it was very violent.
Yeah, man. It's because it's live. It's it's CG, but it's supposed to be happening. Yeah, it was pretty gnarly. And But one of my favorite, I don't know if it's a change from the book, but just in adapting the world, I felt like visually the whole world looked very, very, very well done. The inspiration of that turn of the century Russian culture mixed with a steampunky vibe, mixed with all the costumes, all the suits. And on top of that, the visual effects of like, here's a fake mystical animal. Looks pretty good. Here's all the crazy bat creatures in the fold. Look pretty good. When like the fold was coming out of Darkling's back in the flashback, I was like, huh. And it's like cutting across the land. I was like, that's a great visual. That is a fantastic visual.
And the cut too. I agree with that.
Yeah.
I thought the depiction of that was like, and seeing the splatter and then realizing what that actually was.
Or when Alina got dude's blood in her teeth because the Darkling like killed a guy right in front of her, and she was like, and there's like a little bit of blood right here. I was like,
forgot.
What's
cover
that?
My cat's eyes. Oh my God.
With the blood. Yeah. I mean, pretty violent show compared to something like Invincible, which I know Maude and I just watched. It's not violent at all, but still it was, it's, you know, all of that stuff.
Dinner before watching Invincible.
Looked pretty cool. What's that?
You can't eat dinner before watching Invincible.
No, you can't. No, you can't. Rachel, what were you going to say?
Just a great question from Shizzy. What did you think about the differences between the show's stag collar and the books?
It didn't need to be absorbed into the skin.
I thought that was cool.
No, I didn't like that.
Maude, how come you didn't like it?
Yeah, go ahead.
It kind of like negates what the fabricator and like all that kind of stuff was. It was supposed to be like an amplifier in the lore of it all was something that you would wear. It was like in a way an accessory, but for that, and I think it's a great metaphor for sort of like her being under control, like in control of, or like being completely owned by it. But I don't know, just for me, that just it didn't honor what the lore of the show and like what the actual structure of it really was. Like that's, I don't know, it was just like, again, another unnecessary change that didn't need to happen.
Why do we think the change happened? I felt when that was being absorbed into her body, my answer for that was
Ian Powell. That's my answer. Ian Powell's 100% Ian Powell. Keep going.
I agree. It becomes body horror when it didn't need to be. So I felt like it didn't come across like body horror to me. I felt like the reason for it was so that if you think about the logic of she is under control because she's wearing this collar, well, then just break the collar and take it off. And I didn't really understand how the collar worked when I read the book in terms of like, okay, so is it like unbreakable, like magically? And I know that she had to wear a scarf around it to hide it when she was trying to like go underground and stuff. And when you know, well, a little bit of a spoiler, that happens later in the story, but like at the end of this series, she is now underground with Mal and they're going to go off and try to, you know, whatever they're going to do, plan the next adventure. But like, maybe they decided, maybe I'm giving the people who did the show too much credit. Maybe it is as simple as like, we want this to be cool body horror. And then that's why they did it. But I felt like when they did it, it was like, oh, that shit is permanent. That is not something you can magically break off. You can physically break off. You can bring in a Grisha to somehow break it off or destroy it. It was like, that was, you know,
a real big one. It's cold.
Yeah.
So
yeah, the collar was coming up like this. She was wearing something it was like, she was wearing something and then it was like this, like you could still kind of, you know, cause it was coming up off of her collarbone. So, I think that's why that change happened. Malin here in the chat says, it was changed because of practical reasons for next seasons, maybe. And then Nick Swing says, it made it more like a violation of Alina by the Darkling, but yeah, the change of amplifier lore makes me question it. Also, the way the Darkling also had a piece of the bone in him. Yeah, in his hand. All of that stuff, I was like...
connect them, though. I like that because I think it's more of a visual cue rather than a lore dump, because although they do mention Mortsova, I think that's obviously going to be a big part of the next seasons, should we get them. I agree with Nick Swings that it's like... And this whole thing is kind of about power, who has it, who does. I mean, that's a basic theme, but like the Darkling exerting that power over her, but also what Kat says earlier to kind of show the corruption of the process in this visual way that she in future seasons will be grappling with, am I becoming like him? Do I want to be? Is he the
Mm.
only one who understands me? Especially if Mal starts, now that he doesn't really know as much about what happened with the Darkling yet. He hasn't really seen or had to deal with the extent of her powers as much until they get caught and everything goes south. So if he starts to feel, like he's not needed, or all of the different things that start to happen in the books, this is a great visual reminder that this has taken over her. This is a part of her. Does he want her to just get rid of a part of her, even though she didn't ask for this? Does it feel different? So I think rather than, I think other versions of this, there could have been a lot more exposition. I think we could have used a little more explanation for certain areas for sure. But that visual piece is like, yes, this is permanent. This is a part of you. You are changing into something else again. So that's how I saw it. Also, I thought it looked cool. I thought it was really dope.
It took me out of it a lot because I was looking for practical effects. I was looking for, makeup and stuff. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Anyway, what else we got?
Here's a question. Let's see here. Della Toba in the YouTube chat says, "What did you think of the Grisha powers?" I thought it was cool. I have a question about the book. Did Grisha people have to use have their hands touch? Because there was a lot of emphasis.
Magicians.
What's that?
Have you seen the Magicians? The way that they
it reminded me of the Magicians too.
Oh, yeah. Sure. It's
like
Doctor
the
Strange.
Magicians meets Avatar: The Last Airbender when it comes to sort of summoning the elements. In this particular one, I think they do make reference quite a lot where it's like you destroy hands or you have to bind the hands to stop them from being able to use their powers. So I understand that by using sort of hand signals, and I think that's what you have to learn. The cut has a very particular type of way to activate it, and that's why Alina, when he started doing it, knew to jump in front of the stag because she recognized that movement as the cut. So yes.
And also Kat points out they do have to, because if they're tied up they can't do magic. So it's not necessarily described as a specific movement, but they do use their hands. I also want to call out a couple more comments that I agree with too, that Avery Adventurous, a lot of the stuff in the book relies heavily on emotions, which is a little more difficult to portray. I agree with that. And also Ian Powell, maybe you will potentially root for Alina not having her powers anymore because it feels like such a violation as well. And then with Nox, I agree. And I hope based on some of the character development in the third book and what we learn and kind of some of the breadcrumbs in this season, that there is more of Alina and the Darkling in the second season, where you do get that kind of, well, you didn't even ask me. Why did you just trust Bagra? Then I had to do all this stuff. I wouldn't have had to kill all these people if you had just, blah, 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 which again, sounds like, oh, who would fall for that? But gaslighting is real. She's very beyond Mal. She didn't have anyone else. They won't even give her food because she's half Shu. Which was another change from the books that I thought was brilliant.
Yeah, I liked it. It made it. You understood the geography and the political implications of where you're from as well, and it also makes Mal the fact that he's always constantly standing up for her, even when the rest of the army and the encampment are treating her less than, and that makes him way more stand up and stand out as well. I had another comment that I lost it, but it was there, but I lost it. But it's cool. Come back because I'll get it in 30 seconds when it's middle of someone's conversation.
What do you all want to see in season 2? I think the answer is Nikolai, and I think the other answer is that I really enjoyed the first half of book 2 because it was spoiler alert. It was Alina and Mal focused, and they were desperate. And I really hope to see that level of I guess level of desperation for those characters, because I would like to see those actors together more and to build out their relationship and to keep doing what the show was trying to do in season 1, which is to get you to care for all of that stuff. So I would like to see that, as well as even if the Six of Crows characters aren't even in it, which I know that they will be, but to have even more of a focus on the Alina, Mal, Darkling storyline, because if it's really focused on in season 2, fingers crossed we get it. season 3, fingers crossed we get it, could I think be a little bit more lax with that and then kind of go back more to an ensemble thing, because maybe everything could kind of come together and all the characters would come together in the end, similarly to the way that some events play out in the books. But I think season 2 would be a really, similar to Avatar, man. Avatar book 2, they like slowed everything down. They brought in Toph, and they're like, let's just, let's focus on the core of these characters, do more character work for Prince Zuko. Same sort of thing. So basically just emulate Avatar: The Last Airbender and you'll be good. That's what I want to see in season 2.
When the Fire Nation attacked. Nick Swing made a really great comment as well. Something to expect from season 2. We will be introduced, we hope, to the twins, Tolia and Tamar. But the fact that, no, you were right with that last one. The fact that Alina is now half Shu, it's actually going to be another layer to why they are bonded. And I actually think that using sort of like that, the racial alignment that they have, like that is a really great smoke and mirror for the trust that they put into Alina. You're one of us. We want to protect you because you're Shu. When in fact, it's actually more of a pious thing. It's more about their faith and them believing about the saints. And so, spoiler, because that is a reveal that they were almost planted because she's the sun summoner, I think would be a really
Inej too. And I think they layered that in really well to show the religious aspect with Inej, who is great. And I would love to see more Darkling and Alina. Maybe it's some of their connection stuff. Like maybe that's happening separately, and some of the stuff on the ship could be changed so that they ask Nikolai and they try to find, privateer to help them or things like that. And then that's sort of developing as Mal is struggling a bit with both of them struggling and creating some conflict in their relationship. And as far as the twins too, that's also a way for Alina to find out more about her past, that she already doesn't know almost anything except that her parents died in the fold, but she's been raised in Ravka, so she doesn't have any, beyond all of the propaganda that you see all over Ravka in the background about the Shu, that she'd be able to learn more about that part of her heritage, I think is super interesting as well. I also want to see Wylan, for whoever said that in the chat, who's got it. That's the big one that we haven't seen.
Yeah, right.
I really liked, what was your favorite episode? I don't know. They all kind of blended together. I really liked the ending that had this almost superhero movie mid-credits, post-credits scene where I'm watching the show and my girlfriend turns over to me and she goes, so the Darkling's dead, right? Like there's no way he could have survived. And I was just like, wait. And literally as soon as she asked that, we cut to him walking out of crawling out of the fold, and he gets up and he just goes, follow. Because she was like, how could he have survived? And I was like, wait. I'm sure I'm sure the show is about to tell us. And then when he said follow, I thought that was a great tease for like what they're going to do with that character in season 2 and kind of where they're going. So I thought that was great. I liked that end moment. And I do this thing with Netflix because I'm a psychopath. I keep my Netflix queue very well organized. So as soon as the show was over, I took it out of my Netflix queue because there has not yet been a season 2 announced. Okay. And as soon as it is, I'll put it back in my Netflix queue. It was a sad day when I had to take Glow out of my Netflix queue. Because when they were like, the show's over, we're not going to do season 4 because of the pandemic. I was really, really bummed by that. So I only like to keep shows in my queue that I'm like actively watching or will watch. And then as soon as I'm done, I'm like checking them off the list. But I hope season 2 and 3 are announced soon so that I can put it back in my queue. And
because it just kind of hit the record that Bridgerton just hit, where it's got a full week of being the #1 spot. And because I have followed all of the actors from the show and already followed some of the creative folks, they've been saying like share, because the second weekend is also really important to kind of get past that push. I will be rewatching because I watched it through job perks of screeners for coverage a couple weeks ago. So I'm watching that again this weekend. I watched like specific scenes that I loved. Maude, what do you want to see from a season 2?
Nikolai, 100%. What an amazing character. I really want because like the fact that he's now, you know, defiled Alina, we really missed this nurturing role where she feel like she had someone to teach her, to look up to. And I really wish that he made the first move in season 1 and that he was in control and that he was basically pulling the strings, that she wasn't even aware that he'd attached to her. I wish we had more of that. And I wish he was kind of like celebrating her, enamored by her, and really kind of like depicting this dream that they could be together. And we got little bits of it, but that power dynamic and her doing it first, like it just was a little bit muddled. But now that he's kind of put the collar on and now he's gone full sort of like the Chaboya army, I don't know if we'll have those moments again and how you can go back from that either. So I'm not necessarily looking forward to the Alina Darkling sort of scenes. I'm really looking forward to this Alina having Mal finally and having those really close moments, and then having Nikolai sort of show up and really
Whoa. There's
cranky.
never any reason for that.
There's so many. To have like, because they didn't kiss when they were supposed to kiss in the first book, that moment when she was patching him up, I thought it's like, yes, they're going to make out. They did not. And so I think that when that, excuse me, please, I have thoughts about when that sort of like the chemistry builds up to a palpable stage, insert Nikolai, and she's going to be like, whoa, and Mel's going to be like, and she's gonna be like, no. And I want that.
Yeah, totally. And having someone who is this different kind of charming or different kind of alluring character. Yeah, so we're going to keep talking about this, obviously, as the show is renewed and all of the books and adaptations that we talk about in context. But thank you, everyone, for joining us today. If you want to talk more about how, at least for me, how smoochable everyone is, or send me any Darkling memes, you can find me on Twitter at Rachel Heine. If you guys have anything you want to, obviously I'm just like big stan of the shows.
Yeah.
But we do have homework for next month. So we are going to be reading a book that won in our poll, which was on YouTube and Twitter. A Princess of Mars by Edgar Rice Burroughs. That's going to be Wednesday, May 26th at 5 p.m. Pacific for a full breakdown of the book. But if you want to keep chatting books with us until then, you are in luck. We have an amazing community on Discord that you can join. Maude, can you tell folks a little bit about how to join if they're new?
Sure can. It's with Geek Bomb. We talk playing, watching, and especially reading. I'm actually reading the Six of Crows series at the moment, so that's where the discussion happens to be lingering, especially with the show coming out as well. So if you do want to join that community, head over to patreon.com/geekbomb, sign up for any of the tiers, and you immediately get that access within the Discord. And we hope to see you there because we're going to be continuing weekly discussions, not only about this trilogy, Six of Crows, but also Princess of Mars.
I've already dropped an exclusive video in there that I think one person liked, so you don't want to miss out on that.
I was going to say though, last week we were talking about the book and the fact that you brought up this book in the first month we did the show, the previous version of it in 2016. And I asked you why you like this story and what you're excited about. And you had such a thoughtful answer. So I wanted to see if you can give a preview of the kind of stuff we'll also talk about before we wrap up.
Well, I so appreciate that. And I love more than even reading these books, I love talking about them with you two and with the community. And even to kind of echo the conversation we just had, I would also ask the chat if you are down to read this book and join us in 4 weeks. Also watch that movie that came out, the Disney movie that came out in 2012. John Carter is what it's called. Very vague, but it's the John Carter of Mars movie, so that we can have another similar little bit of a discussion of like, it's been adapted. What worked, what didn't? Mm-hmm. Why did they make those changes? I love that stuff. And the other thing is I'm excited to talk about the book because I love so much sci-fi and fantasy stuff, and it breaks my brain in half to think that this story came out 26 years before the character of Superman was created. Mm-hmm. And you know, so many years before Star Wars and years before Lord of the Rings and all this other stuff. So like this kind of story to me is the DNA of a lot of classic sci-fi and fantasy storytelling. And so there's going to be things in there that seem redundant. You're going to read the book and be like, this is just the movie Avatar. Yes, it's very similar because the movie Avatar lifts from so many of that classic, and all of our favorite pop culture, geniuses like a George Lucas or
it's like Dune, where you're like, haven't we seen this before? Well, yes, but
exactly. Dune's a great example too. Dune is another hugely influential piece of work that we've seen. Even if the Dune movie didn't come out and shatter records, we've seen that influence of a book like Dune in so many other TV shows and movies and stuff like that. So it's just going to be fun to read a really outdated, full of tropey book from 1912, originally published, and to talk about the whole idea of that kind of pulpy science fiction stuff and if there's anything still of value in it, or if it's best left in the past, but still to be inspiring, future generations of storytellers or whatever. So if you like Star Wars, come and check it out. It's going to be lots and lots of fun. And watch the movie. It's streaming on Disney Plus. So there you go.
And I think we're talking about different things to do throughout the month to keep in touch with the community, and we'll be in touch about that. But we definitely want to do more things like watch along. So stay tuned. Let us know if you have books that you think we would like, that you would like to read. Make sure you join the Discord channel, talk to us online, send us fun book memes, and we will see you all next month, and we will chat with you on Discord. Thanks, everyone. Go watch Shadow and Bone.
Bye. Bye.
Da-da-da.